Some honorable mentions before we get into the top five. Honorable mentions for wide receivers, the Packers again. Christian Watson still unproven. Say what you will. Yes, he looks good. I like him a lot. Reminds me a lot of potentially Deshaun Jackson as a downfield threat. Romeo Doubs is there, sure. Samori Toure, I don't mind Toure, but if you're putting some competition in there, we'll see who rises to the top. And if they make it a priority and, it's a second, third round pick like they've been doing in recent years and throughout the recent history of the franchise, I think that there could be potentially a number one receiver here. I think Christian Watson's probably going to end up being that guy, but at the very least, you should be able to get a number two here. Honorable mention because there's some other better spots. The offensive line can use some work. And again, Jordan Love is the quarterback here. We don't really know what we have with Jordan Love. I thought he looked good enough to be an NFL quarterback last year. And I think he will end up being the starter here. And Aaron Rodgers gets traded to the Jets. But honorable mention, not a bad spot. Let's keep our eye on it and see who goes there. If it's a guy that we really like or you really like, you have high on your board, then he lands on the Packers, that might be worth bumping up a couple spots in your rankings for your rookie draft. The Detroit Lions, Josh Reynolds, quality, depth roster wide receiver. I don't not like Josh Reynolds. I love Jameson Williams. He's definitely a guy. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's definitely a guy, but they're going to need another wide receiver there because just in all honesty, Josh Reynolds ain't it. Khalif Raymond ain't it. So they're going to need another guy. There's not a huge tight end. TJ Hawkinson is gone, right? There's not a huge tight end target there. So that's another honorable mention for tight ends that we didn't really talk about. That's a spot that a tight end can go, but whatever. So the Detroit Lions, that's another spot that they could go. Jared Goff's there. They got a quality quarterback, offensive line, offensive coordinator. I don't mind it. We'll keep an eye on the Detroit Lions. And again, it depends on who they get. If it's a slot guy, not loving it. If it's a guy that can do similar things to Jameson Williams, like a Jalen Hyatt or something, might not be super excited. But, if it's a possession type guy, even maybe a guy like, Mingo or Charlie Jones or, Rashee Rice, guys like that, some possession type receivers, Cedric Tillman, I would like, guys like that, then I'll take a look at it with the Detroit Lions. So let's move into the top five for wide receivers. Atlanta Falcons, people might hate on this one because people hate Arthur Smith. I get it, but at the end of the day, Arthur Smith just doesn't care about your fantasy team. That's kind of what it boils down to. And I think that there's some serious room for a slot receiver, middle of the field type of a guy. We'll see, but I think if Jackson Smith-Njigba goes to this team at number 8, which I think is very, very, very possible. If Jackson Smith-Njigba is an Atlanta Falcons, I'm going to be an Atlanta Falcon. I'm going to be all over that, and I think you should be bumping him up. He's already, going number, the 104, 103, 104, 105 maybe. But that's a quality landing spot for him. I hope he ends up going there. We'll see. But even a guy, like Tank Dell or even Josh Downs, there's a lot of good slot guys in this year's draft. So guys like that, a possession receiver, high target guy, middle of the field type of a guy, kind of a safety blanket, right? Because that's not Kyle Pitts at the tight end position, and that's certainly not Drake London outside. So if you get a middle of the field type of guy, I think he can gobble up nothing crazy, but in a rookie year of 600-700 yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns, something like that. That's going to be some sneaky value if it's not JSN. If it's Smith-Njigba, he's going to go where he's going to go, and it is what it is. But if it's a lesser-known guy that you maybe like, a slot guy, for me, it'd be Tank Dell. If Tank Dell goes here, I'm going to be all over that, potentially drafting him in the second round, to be honest. We'll see how that works out, but this is the number 5 spot for me. I don't mind it. I like Desmond Ridder. The offensive line is pretty good, and we'll take it from there. So let's move on to number 4. The number 4 spot, we saw this team already, the Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, I had it for tight end. I'm having it for pass catcher. What's that saying? There's room for someone here, in my opinion. A guy like Zay Jones or, a Jalen Hyatt. I want someone that they don't already have, is what I want. They have an over the middle field guy, Keenan Allen. He's fantastic. They have a sideline, go up and get it. Mike Williams, Gerald Everett. I think, again, I had them on the tight end list. I think they could replace him, but I want a burner. I want a straight burner. Jalen Hyatt would be fantastic. Zay Jones, I'm happy, or Zay Flowers, sorry, I'm happy with as well. A guy like that just is a straight burner. Justin Herbert absolutely has the arm. We've seen it. You know, he loves to throw that ball. He throws a great deep ball. There's a very good offensive line. So there's going to be time for him to throw that deep ball. Kellen Moore wants to throw the ball a ton. We all know that. He's the offensive coordinator there now. And at the end of the day, you know, Keenan Allen ain't getting any younger. Mike Williams can't seem to stay healthy. Josh Palmer's quality, but you know, I think if it's a good wide receiver that comes in, he could potentially beat him outright for that third wide receiver spot. And if Keenan Allen and Mike Williams aren't staying healthy all year, like we saw with Josh Palmer last year, there's room for another guy. And again, especially if he's a burner, we could see some serious pop up spike weeks from a fast wide receiver going to the Los Angeles Chargers. So that's my number 4 spot. I think honestly, with this one, a little bit of a caveat. It kind of depends on the type of receiver that goes here. If it's a slot guy that's going to take over for Keenan Allen eventually, you know, dynasty, yes, absolutely. But for redraft, I'm not, that super excited with it, year one. Maybe it's a guy we'll reassess later on, but I want a burner. So give me a slant and go type of guy. And that's what I'm looking for on the Chargers. And I'm going to bump them up if that ends up happening. Number 3, we got the number 3 spot, the Minnesota Vikings. So obviously Adam Thielen's finally gone. I don't mind KJ Osborne. I've been drafting him a ton in big board drafts. They have the best, one of, if not the best wide receiver in the game in Justin Jefferson. They got a fairly quality, I think they're, above average offensive line. They got an offensive minded coach, likes to throw the ball. We saw Dalvin Cook's numbers dip a little bit last year. And I think Dalvin Cook's probably pretty much definitely not going to be on this team. They got to wait for him to be able to pass a physical. Post June 1, they're going to save, over $10 million the next 2 years, I believe it is. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's tons of money. I very, very much think that they either trade or cut Dalvin Cook. Again, we saw his numbers pull back anyways. They have Madison there. Cool. That's great. They need another wide receiver. TJ Hawkinson's there. He's a fantastic target at tight end. Absolutely. Another guy I've been drafting the shit out of in big boards. They got the best wide receiver, but if you can beat out KJ Osborne, Jalen Naylor's there too. Yeah, sure. Former Michigan State Spartan, but a guy that I would like potentially to go here if they pick him later on in the draft is another Michigan State Spartan, and that's Jaden Reed. I think that he could be, fantastic for this team. If you can beat out KJ Osborne, that's kind of what this all boils down to. If KJ Osborne ends up being the number 2 target, but you're still number 3, again, in a pass first offense, and Kirk Cousins can still get the job done. I really don't care what anyone says. Kirk Cousins can sling it, man. The dude can sling the ball. If he wins a couple, he would have to win probably like 2 Super Bowls, at least one, obviously. He might have the numbers eventually. Not that I'm not going as far as saying he gets in, but he might have the numbers for a Hall of Fame career. And I don't think he gets in unless he wins minimum 1 Super Bowl minimum, but his numbers should be there. Kirk Cousins can sling it. So again, with the way that this offense runs, if you can beat out at least Jalen Naylor, and if you can beat out KJ Osborne, for sure, chalk them up. So if they draft a wide receiver in the first round, a Zay Flowers, where they're at in the draft in the first round, I'm going to be all over that. But to be honest, so is everybody. So, it depends on the receiver. It depends on where he goes. And if it's a guy later in the draft, like a Jonathan Mingo type of guy, again, another guy I'm going to mention, Cedric Tillman, a guy I really like. Guys like that, if they can come in, I'm going to be highlighting them on my board, maybe bumping them up a couple spots in my rookie rankings. So there you go. Number 3, that's the number 3 Minnesota Vikings. Moving on to number 2, the Houston Texans. So I know they don't have a quarterback, and we just went over it's one of the best landing spots for a quarterback. It's not out of this world that Davis Mills ends up starting for this team next year. It's not out of this world. know if that's going to happen or not. We'll see. And again, check out the mock draft on Monday, but we'll see. Either way, Davis Mills has sustained a 1,000-yard receiver in Brandon Cooks 2 years ago. He has done that. Hopefully they stop doing this stupid experiment with Jeff Driscoll, who's not on the team anymore, but he was there last year, and there was this silliness happening where they're pulling him and putting him in, and he was actually throwing. It wasn't a Taysom Hill thing. He was throwing the ball more than Taysom Hill does. It was just a little ridiculous, and that obviously won't happen regardless. I think with the new offensive coordinator coming in again from the San Francisco 49ers, with DeMeco Ryans, I think that a guy like Davis Mills can run that offense. I think if you put Davis Mills on the 49ers, he would be minimum just as good as Brock Purdy. Minimum. Not that I'm saying Davis Mills is a guy, because he's certainly not, but I'm also saying that Brock Purdy's not a guy. So there we go. They do need some wide receiver help, which again, I think they will address in the draft regardless. I think there's a very reasonable possibility that Quentin Johnston is drafted at 12th overall. I know they like him. That's a guy that I would have higher on my list if he goes. The reason why they're here and the team that's at number 1 is here is because if a wide receiver goes to this team, whether it's the first, second, maybe third round, that could be the number 1 wide receiver on this team. They're not going to be a good team, the Houston Texans, regardless. So they're going to have to throw the ball. They got a reasonable offensive line. Again, even if it is Davis Mills, that's what I'm getting at, is that's kind of worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario, Davis Mills is slinging the rock for the Houston Texans. He has sustained 1,000-yard wide receiver. They have a quality offensive line. They've got a good offensive coordinator. You get a good wide receiver here, he could be the number 1 target, 60, 70 catches, 1,000 yards, 5-6 touchdowns, something like that. That's not out of the realm of possibility for any wide receiver that goes here. I'm sure everybody remembers Amon-Ra St. Brown was a fourth round pick, but there was zero competition for him when he got to Detroit, right? So I don't care if they draft a guy in the 3rd, 4th, borderline even 5th round, depending on who it is. They could be the number 1 target on this team. So that's why I have the Houston Texans so high. Do they have their flaws? Yes, of course. They're not a good team. They're picking number 2 for a reason. But any wide receiver that goes here, there's going to be ample opportunity for that guy to succeed. So there you go. That's number 2. Let's go on to number 1, the Tennessee Titans. Minimum, they're going to have Ryan Tannehill there. You know what you kind of get with Ryan Tannehill. I talked about it in the quarterback section that, Tannehill, I think that this is his last year regardless, if he even makes it to the season. They could walk away from him and save a ton of money post June 1. This could be a target team for a guy like Lamar Jackson. This could be a team that trades up for CJ Stroud with the Mike Vrabel connection with Ohio State. Maybe they go with a local guy, Hendon Hooker, at 12 where they're at, and let him sit, let Ryan Tannehill play. And, Hooker takes over next year when he's recovered from the ACL. There's all sorts of opportunities or not opportunities, but just possibilities and scenarios for this team's quarterback position, the Tennessee Titans. So looking at the wide receivers, realistically, it's Treylon Burks and a bunch of guys that people like. Right? People like Kyle Phillips. I get it. Yeah, I don't mind him either. But you telling me that a quality, prospect that comes in here couldn't beat him out for that number 1 spot, or number 2 spot, or even Trey Burks for that number 1 spot, right? Like there's ample opportunity here for a quality wide receiver. Another guy that I've mentioned a few times, again, local guy, Tennessee, Cedric Tillman, even Jalen Hyatt. Guys like that, if one of those types of guys fall to the Tennessee Titans, and it's minimum Ryan Tannehill throwing the ball, I'm all right with that. Offensive line's in a better spot. I don't love the offensive coordinator position here. I'd like to see, a more capable offensive mind, a better offensive mind come into Tennessee. We'll see. And they're going to have to make a switch from Derrick Henry at some point where they're just running the ball 20, 30 times a game. They're going to have to make that switch at some point. And again, it's going to kind of depend on what they do at quarterback, but much like the Houston Texans, this is a spot where a guy can come in and end up being the #1 wide receiver, especially if it's a slot guy. And there's tons of slot guys in this year's draft. If Jackson Smith-Njigba, again, the Ohio State connection, if he goes there at 12, even with Ryan Tannehill, I'm more than happy with that. Again, everyone would be, but again, Tank Dell. The list goes on for potential guys that can go here. Zay Flowers, guys like that are going to get chalked up your rookie draft. So pay attention to whoever the Tennessee Titans take at wide receiver, because they absolutely will be, maybe not in the first round, maybe not in the second round, but third, fourth, fifth round, they will be taking some wide receivers in this year's draft, at least 1, 2, 3. Pay attention to who they are. If they're guys high on your rankings, on your board, maybe chalk them up a couple spots because they land here. Again, worst case scenario, Ryan Tannehill. Potentially best case scenario, Lamar Jackson. You could be looking at CJ Stroud or Hendon Hooker. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. That's an interesting conversation. But